It's there! Holy moly, this one's going to go big.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. Right then, Gambling Low Ebbs Part 5. This is kind of a Q&A video. I have seen other channels do this and I think it works really well. It's where they upload a video and then the video gets quite a lot of feedback in terms of comments and questions. And rather than try and do it through replies to comments on the video, they actually make a follow-on video, which is like a Q&A, questions and answers, and dealing with those comments and those questions in a follow-on video. So I'm going to do that here. But before I actually get into it, what I will also say is thank you very much to everyone who left a comment on Gambling Low Ebbs Part 5. I do apologise because you basically all got a copy and paste response where I just changed the name to your name. I am going to be hold my hands up to that. And I will also be honest with you that making a video like that is quite draining. And once I've done it and got it recorded, edited, uploaded, as much as I genuinely appreciate you taking the time, if you dropped a like and you left a comment, I really do appreciate that. I didn't quite find myself in the space where I could start typing out a reply to every single one of you. So I do apologise that you all got this essentially a copy and paste response. But what I'm saying here, and I'll just read it out here, just a random one I'll pick out. Thanks for the comment, Gary. The video has generated a lot of comments and questions both here on YouTube and elsewhere. So I'm going to make a follow-on video to do proper replies to everyone if that's okay. Thanks for taking the time to comment, and I'll do a proper thank you plus reply to everyone in the follow-on video. So that is what this video is. But I do want to make it clear that I owe every single one of you thanks for leaving a comment on this and basically almost universally supportive. Some of the earlier Low Ebbs videos, they've attracted the odd snarky comment, but in general, overall, the feedback that I've got, the comments that I've got have been positive and supportive. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't have got to part 5. I'd have just binned it after part 1. When I did Gambling Low Ebbs part 1, I genuinely didn't know what was going to happen when I uploaded that to my channel. But the feedback from that very first one was kind of like, thanks for talking about it. Yeah, I've been through some shit as well with gambling. Thanks for putting it up. And it is that kind of support and the comments on all of the series that actually gave me the kind of strength, if you will, to make part 5, because that was a hard one to do. But I also hope you can understand that I was kind of spending half a day typing out replies to comments, and each of you did deserve a reply, but I was so drained from actually making the video itself that I just didn't have it in me. It was also, I posted it over at Casino Meister as well. I post links to my videos over at Casino Meister. There were some questions over there as well that I want to get into. There were some questions that people I know were sort of asking me privately behind the scenes as well. So what I'm going to do is roll that all in together into a follow-on video. But I will just say that one more time, really, honestly, thank you to every single one of you who left a comment on Gambling Low Ebbs Part 5 and indeed any of the previous ones in the series. If it weren't for that, I just would not have been able to get these done. I would have just stopped. So just having that kind of voice speaking to you that says, thanks for sharing, or I've been through this as well, or I know where you're coming from, it helps. It really, really does. And I think, there was a lot of chopping and changing and editing involved to get Gambling Low Ebbs Part 5 into shape. I did leave one little bit in there where you could see the way that my emotions were going. So it was a tough one to do, and it was you folks who made that one possible. So with that said, what I want to do is just go down the comments and address specifically the questions that were asked about some of the follow-on from that and how things worked out after the end of Gambling Low Ebbs Part 5, because of course I finished it going into the 1st of January 1995 when I went to that midnight ceremony at the church with Mrs. Degsy and her mum and dad. And I'll pick up this comment here from Graham the Goldfish, who says, "Thanks for posting this video, Degsy. Addiction can truly change and warp who you are. I have never stolen, but I have done some unforgivable things myself when gripped by addiction, and the repercussions always followed swiftly after. If there is anything positive to draw from it, it is seeing others with problems and learning to try to understand rather than judging them. I don't think I could do that without having been in the grips of gambling addiction myself. Unable to explain why I couldn't stop myself self-destructing my life and my finances, and seemingly being physically incapable of stopping, knowing full well what I was doing." And yes, that is a point that I will return to. There is the final line that Graham put in there. I'm not going to read that out. It's very kind of him to say that, but this follow-on video is not about me, stroking my own cock. But thank you for that comment, Graham. And this was quite a common sort of refrain as well. Scar here saying, "I've never stolen from family and friends. However, when I was younger, I applied for and taken out many credit cards and payday loans with little intention of ever paying them back, unless I won, and even then I wanted the cash to gamble with." And that was kind of like what I've been leaning to with all of these videos, is how life becomes, and particularly when you get to the point where you're skint, where you've exhausted all the kind of easy or easy-ish routes of getting cash, you will every single day try and find some inventive new way just to get 20 quid in your pocket so you can go out and gamble with. And then you have Cliff Cook here making the point that I think it's her dad you should be grateful to, and that he could imagine a situation where the police are sent round to have someone arrested. And yes, that what I did is against the law. Taking somebody else's cash card, withdrawing cash as them using their card, that is a crime. I am very, very well aware of that. And that is one of the themes that I want to move into here. And I'll get onto that some more when I answer Dunover's questions from over at Casino Meister. But yeah, the thing is, Cliff, I do not underestimate for a second the gravity of what it was I was doing. And then you get just short comments like this from Harry that kind of tear you apart inside. And Harry here saying, "Gambling addicts don't get much sympathy. I must have lost $500,000 and still can't stop. When I was married, I remember I went to the local KFC to get us both some lunch. I had £800 in my pocket. It was 5 minutes walk away. Got to the shop and there was a large queue. So I popped into the bookies next door. You can guess the rest. 2 hours later, I lost it all on the roulette and only had enough to get the missus some food. I went home and lied that there was a problem with their ovens, which she didn't believe. I felt physically sick for all the lies. I stole from my parents and brother to gamble. Gambling is a curse." And you know what? This is the thing, that these stories are not rare. And I think if you have been a gambling addict, and I think the fruit machine addict, or just any of these machines that are just fucking around, I know it's the random ones now, and they've turned up in bookies and all that kind of thing, with the £500 jackpot. And I think, couldn't you do £20 a spin on roulette at some point until they dialed it back to a £2 maximum? These things are just everywhere. It's the kind of device that you would think would be in some kind of licensed casino, in some kind of moderately safe haven, but they are just everywhere, and particularly with fruit machines, and back when they were classified as amusements with prizes, so they kind of skirted around gambling legislation. I still remember that thread on fruit forums back in, it must have been 2001 or 2002, where Nesto Man started that thread called The Real Price of Fruit Machines, and he opened up about what fruit machine addiction had done to him, and everyone kind of just followed his lead and started with their own stories. And so many variations on this, where you go out to do something that should take 15 or 20 minutes and should cost you like a £5 or less. You come back 2 hours later, you're fucking skint, there's no money, and you haven't even got the thing you were supposed to go out for. It's such a common story, such a common refrain in the addict community, and it never gets easier to read an account like that, because I can, when I read Harry's comment there, I'm like, yeah, you know what, I know exactly what you mean. Then we have here Chatterbox Ailman saying, my gambling low ebbs have been in the last month, probably about 5 of them, losing £3,000 on video slots over the course of 3 weeks. This also caused many sleepless nights. It is very addictive and damages health. Finally won 1k back, so hopefully can now take a nice break from slots. And this is part of the point with the Gambling Low Ebbs series, is that even though what I'm talking about is historical, the problem is real and present and still in the current day. And it's comments like that kind of remind me again, and kind of give some sort of point to this, to this whole Gambling Low Ebbs series, which is to say you are not alone. There are other, not just me, but many other people who have been through this. And maybe just to put the idea out there that there can be light at the end of the tunnel and you can escape from it. And I will just read this one here from Christopher, who says, thank you for sharing. I have watched every video from you. You're an inspiration, and you'll never know how much your videos are helping me through a very difficult time. Not just the low ebbs, but all of your vids. I hope I don't sound like some kind of weirdo. It was nice to put a face to all the stories and all the other videos. Once again, thank you very much for all your work and sharing your vids. And sorry it's taken so long to finally comment. That's the kind of comment that does make it feel worthwhile. It takes me a long time to get myself in the space where I can record something like Gambling Low Ebbs Part 5. Then I have to like dissect it when I go through the edit and go through it piece by piece and get it all right. It's a grueling process, but then I kind of have in my head that the output at the end, hopefully, is something that the idea of them is, I guess, to kind of give some kind of comfort and some kind of support to other people, because I went through this fucking shit big time, but it was many, many years ago. But you can tell when I'm making the videos, once I kind of dredge it back up, it is still incredibly raw. So that is the thing. I guess the kind of one thing that I would say that I want these videos to do more than anything else is give comfort and support to other people and encouragement that it is possible to get past it and move on to a different phase in your life, one that isn't blighted by gambling addiction. And just a slightly light-hearted one here from Fishter, who says, fax machines still exist. Our office still use one. In fact, recently upgraded the office printer to an all-in-one printer, scanner, photocopier, and 2 fax lines in one device. I am finding it hard to imagine a scenario where anyone would fax a document, because they were kind of their time. They worked, but they were so slow and shit compared to just emailing a document. That was the thing. They were essentially an early version of email. That was how you move documents around. I don't quite know why Fishner is still faxing documents around in the year 2021. I guess there must be a use case scenario for it. I'll be interested to know what that is. And from Harry here, who just says, you've got a good woman there, Degsy. She definitely changed your life. And yeah, I hope that has come across in the video already. That is something that I never, ever lose sight of. And I will never forget, and I will never, ever take her for granted. And we are City here, who has been he's been a regular on the Fruit Machine emulation scene from pretty much day one, right back to the MSN emulation community days. And he's saying it's no surprise to a fellow addict of the time that you would do such a thing, and it's something a fellow addict can fully understand. Like you indicated, addiction can drive a person to do stuff that is completely out of character in all other aspects of life. The addicted moment can turn the nicest person on earth into something completely the polar opposite. Mrs. Degsy must have already fallen head over heels for you to understand that you were not the person the addiction was trying to make you appear to be. Ex-addicts can make up for some of our behaviour by understanding and being supportive and forgiving of others who are still suffering from an addiction, whatever that addiction may be. So there's a couple of things that I want to unpack there. Definitely that last bit there is, I do not condemn, I do not judge. You know, it's so easy to say, and you hear it sometimes, oh, he's just a fucking pisshead, he's just a fucking junkie. And say, no. Behind that pisshead, behind that junkie is a person. This is not a fucking lifestyle choice. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, you know what? I actually quite fancy being an alcoholic. That sounds fun. Or you know what? I want to be a gambling addict. I want to be a drug addict. I want to have my life dominated and controlled by something that corrodes every aspect of my existence. These are people who are hurting. Show me an addict and I will show you someone who is in pain. Nobody does this for fun. There is something else going on there, and that is why that really resonates with me there. So yes, 100% I get what We Are City is saying there. And if there's, oh God, you know, if you're trying to take anything positive out of having been an addict, is that you can be a more understanding person. You can look at other people who are in the same predicament that you were, and instead of condemning them or judging them, you actually feel compassion for them and want to understand what is going on. And this leads into a little story I've got, and it's going back, oh God, it must be earlier this year, probably 5 or 6 months ago. I was in the kitchen just getting stuff ready for Mrs. Degsy and Junior, and I heard the sound of breaking glass from the utility room. We've got an old Victorian terraced house, front yard, backyard, 3-storey house, and a little utility room at the back that kind of leads off from the kitchen. I was in the kitchen and I heard the sound of breaking glass from the utility room. And I thought, what the fuck is that? You know, straight away, it's like the wrong sound. You shouldn't be hearing the sound of breaking glass a few feet away from where you are at the back of your own house. And I sort of went through to the utility room, and there's this lad out there, and he's actually got, I'm not fucking making this up, he's got his fist through one of the panels in this window. I could see his kind of startled face and his fist, and he was trying to get his arm back through this little broken pane of glass. So I opened the back door, went out into the backyard. I said, what are you doing? You just put my window through. He said, and he looked at me and he got his arm out, and it was bloody where he'd gone through the window and where he pulled his arm out through the window. I was kind of like, what's going on? You've just put your hand through me blooming window. And he was like, I'm really sorry. I'm at the wrong house. I'm sorry. I thought this was me. I thought this was my parents' house. And straight away, my initial, because you get that kind of fight or flight. It's like something's going on at the back of my house. I'll go out there. I went out into the yard. And as I went out to kind of confront him, not like super aggressively or anything, but what the bloody hell's going on? You've just put my window through. And he stood there in front of me. And I remember he looked absolutely bereft. I'd place him late teens, early 20s. He was a bit scruffy. He was a bit bedraggled. He looked like he had been through the mincer. And then I very quickly became, oh, sorry, I thought I'm at the wrong house. I thought it was my parents' house. And he was clearly drunk, at the very least he was drunk, probably on something else as well. And the immediate thing, once that initial kind of shock about having my window put through at the back of the house had passed, I looked at him and saw someone in a huge amount of pain. And I kind of looked at him, stood in front of me. He was just completely deflated, it was almost like his body was just flopping in front of me. He's standing there with his bleeding arm. And I looked at his face and I looked into his eyes. And you know what I saw? I saw me looking back at me. I saw the me of late 92 going into 93 into 94. I saw the face of an addict. And I didn't know exactly what he had going on. I didn't know his situation. But as much as anything else, I just saw pain. I just saw hurt. I saw someone who was absolutely on their arse. And there was no fight in him. There was no kind of battling in him whatsoever. He was just completely crushed and broken. And I kind of thought to myself, the last thing this lad needs is someone ringing the police up after him. So I said, look, are you all right? Show us your arm. And he said, okay. It's okay. It's just a cut. You'll be all right. Where are you going? And he said, look, it's me mum and dad's house down there. I think he'd been off island. We found out later that there's a very troubled thing going on. He's been in and out of all kinds of trouble with the police and that kind of thing. So I kind of calmed him down and said, look, okay, I tell you what, I'm not going to ring the police. I'm not happy with you because you've put me window through. But I tell you what, just get on your way, go and find somewhere to be quiet and just relax for a bit because you're clearly not in a good way. And he was like, yeah, oh, thanks very much. You're not going to ring the police? No, I'm not going to ring the police. But you need to find somewhere safe to go. I mean, you know what? Thinking back, I should have actually brought him in for a bit because I think he needed to sit down for a bit and just take some time. But kind of sent him on his way without further incident. And not that long after, about 20, 25 minutes later, the police came knocking at the door. And they were clearly looking for him. And said, all right, we're looking for someone who's blah, 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 some disturbance, some trouble. Do you know anything about it? And you know what? I could throw this at him. I could say, yeah, you know what? He's just put the window through at the back of my house. I want him done for criminal damage. And I was like, no, that's the last fucking thing in the world he needs. Because I looked into his face, looked into his eyes and saw the same bewildered, complete sense of loss that I remember so well from so many times. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. So I said, nope, I haven't seen him. No problem. It's all okay here, officer. And the police went on the way. And we did get, we were talking to the people 3 doors down. And it was their son, or I think their stepson or something like that. And explained what had happened. And they offered to pay for the window and that. We never took the money in the end. Because here's the other thing. I went and talked to Mrs. Degsy because I had to explain to Mrs. Degsy why the utility room was full of glass and why one of the windows was smashed. And I said to her exactly what I've kind of said to you now. Which is, I just felt sorry for him. Once that initial kind of, what the hell are you doing putting my window through? I just looked at him and thought, oh my God, this guy's in a world of pain. And she got it. She got it straight away. It wasn't like, what do you mean? He's put a window through. You should have told the police about it. She was like, no, she understood it. We both understood it. You know, we were on the same page and got that this guy didn't need more condemnation and punishment. Maybe in that moment, just a little bit of understanding might have helped him out. And we can turn it into something positive as well, because you know what? It was a shitty old window. We've had all the windows done in the house now, and that was one of the last ones to get done. It was an old sort of repurposed window from the 1950s with a load of little glass panes in it, and we've been saying we need to get that window replaced. So we did that. That was the cue. So I just kind of temporarily sort of put a bit of cardboard and taped it up, and we got the whole window replaced with a new double glazed one. So it was fine. Nothing lost in that regard. Technically, we could have asked the people from 3 doors down to pay for it, but we didn't. We just paid for it ourselves because it was something that needed doing. That, I think, is a very, very long-winded way of saying that, yes, I agree with We Are City here and what he is saying, that if you've been there, you know it when you see it. And I saw it in him. And I thought, in this moment in time, the last thing this lad needs, and he wasn't that old. He must have been late teens or early 20s. And he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. You could just see it. God, I hate to use the word. Is that a gift that addiction has given me? It's an understanding. It's the word there that We Are City uses. Understand. It's a compassion. It's a feeling for another human being and you see that pain in their face. So that was a slightly long diversion there. We'll get up to Alec here, who says, did you repay the money? Well, not in the driest technical sense. No, I did not. But here's the thing. In early 94, when me and Mrs. Degsy, in May of 94, when me and Mrs. Degsy first started going out together, just so happened that my birthday fell when we were just about an item. So for my 20th birthday, Mrs. Degsy bought me a £1 pint of lager in, I think it was, if I had to have a guess, I'd say it was the Ritz down on fucking Whitworth Street in Manchester, which I believe is still there. So she bought me a £1 pint. And then in November of 94, it was Mrs. Degsy's 21st birthday, because she's 6 months older than me. And we were a proper item by that time. And I bought her a Sega Mega Drive Sonic pack, which cost the better part of £200. And there was certainly in part of buying that gift for her, I was mindful of the fact that one of the things I had done was stolen 250 quid from her. The reason I had that kind of money was I applied for my student loan for 1994. So I got that sort of back end of October, somewhere in middle of October, something like that. So I had over £1,000 come into my bank account, and I bought her, like I say, a Mega Drive for her room in her student halls, which is not technically a repayment, but it was close-ish, I suppose. I know that's a shit answer, and I'm not trying to evade it. It was a really kind of frenetic time. Like I say, I've been quite upfront in Gambling Low Ebbs Part 5 that both me and Mrs. Degsy had shit going on. So it was a very, very complicated period in our lives. Like I say, we were both up and down would be, I think, understatement of the century. But it did bring her some real pleasure to get this brand new box Sega Mega Drive that she could plug into her telly in her halls of residence and play Sonic the Hedgehog, because she loved video games back then and she still loves video games now. As I record this video, she is sat above me, and her and Degsy Jr. are playing World of Warcraft together. And a comment here from Joe Exotic, who says, the good moral to this story is as follows. You could have met the people you did and learnt the things you now know about fruities at an earlier age. Been making a fortune instead of losing, but that wasn't the case. My point being is everything happens for a reason. What happened to you and Mrs. Degsy made you who you are. Strange how it could have been different, maybe better or less explosive. But 27 years later, you're stronger for it all. Much stronger than you might have been if you knew all about fruities back then. Doesn't mean you'd have ended up any happier in the long run. And yeah, you know what? He's absolutely right. And this is something that me and Mrs. Degsy have talked about, is it was a very peculiar bringing together of circumstances that put us together in the first place and kept us together. It's a little bit like, I mean, it's a common refrain in it's not exactly an original story in terms of how our mind ponders about this. But you've got the obvious one, of course, is the film The Butterfly Effect, where, you know, the guy keeps going back and okay, this is where things went wrong, I'm going to go back and fix that, but then something else fucks up, so I'm going to go back again and fix that, and then something else fucks up. So yeah, it's a very good point that time is linear. We don't get to do trying it again insofar as we go from point A to point B along a timeline, and you can replay these things as much as you want in your head, but fundamentally it's from start to finish, and you end up where you are based on things that happened in the past. And we've had me and Mrs. Degsy have had this conversation. It's like, I'm not actually sure, even though we know that this thing was shit or this thing was shit, if we go back and change it or undo it, then maybe this doesn't happen or this doesn't happen. So yeah, we are aware of that, and we have talked about that you know what, we'll take it based on where we landed, based on where we ended up. We'll take it, it's fine. And Karaoke Nut here, who I do know as MPU5 over at Desert Island Fruits, this latter part of his comment here saying, I'm so glad you have a happy ending to it all and you've beaten your addiction. And what shines through is the absolute love that you and Mrs. Degsy have for each other. That's got to be worth all the jackpots on earth put together and then some. Priceless, in fact. And yes, there is not a single day that goes by where I don't think myself, look, I mean, let me just make this clear. I'm not, there's no element of me that thinks, fucking hell, I can get away with anything, me. This is fucking marvellous. I'm fucking charmed. Absolutely not. I appreciate and understand 100% how incredibly lucky I was to have the support of the family and friends that I did, and of course in Mrs. Degsy as my sort of girlfriend, then fiance, then wife, and also her mum and dad when they became part of my life as well. So yeah, I don't take any of it even remotely for granted. Quite the opposite. I count my blessings every single day, and that is just a really nice I'll use the word sweet. It's just a really sweet comment that kind of makes these videos possible to do. So thank you to Gary for that one. And I am sorry if I haven't read out your exact comment there. I do apologize, but there were a few that were along similar lines, and I do want to repeat that statement that I made earlier, that I genuinely say thank you to every single one of you. And that is as much as anything what this video is for, because I do feel shit about giving you copy and pasted responses, but I just didn't quite have it in me to start typing out individual responses to all of you. So I hope this has answered your comments and also answered your questions about this. And this comes on to Dunover's questions over at Casino Meister, and questions I've been asked elsewhere is like, how do you get on with Mrs. Degsy's parents now, given what happened back then? And the answer to that, honestly, is really well. We are family. We simply consider each other to be family. I mean, we see them every week. I mean, Mrs. Degsy is very close to her mum and dad. She speaks to one or both of them pretty much every single day. They don't live that far away from us, and we either go up to see them at least once a week or vice versa. They come down to us. We'll share Christmases together. We'll go round to each other's houses when there's birthdays. We're constantly in touch with each other. I am kind of the tech support, because I work in IT. I'm kind of, it's like you get promoted to the position of IT consultant. So I frequently fielding IT related questions from my father-in-law. One of the things that will strike a chill of fear into your heart is, Alex, I've been reading about these VPN things. I was like, oh my God, this is not going anywhere good. But printer's not behaving, tech's not working, the thing on the TV's not doing what it's supposed to do, but I am always happy to help. And there is, of course, always a bit of me that is mindful that they could have just chucked me on the scrap heap. Back in '94, they could have said, you know what, fuck this. We're not having anything to do with this guy ever again. And they didn't. They gave me another chance. They gave me a chance to prove myself, and whilst I will not pretend it was easy going, certainly I remember through 95 into 96 they were wary of me, and it was mentioned, it was about, we're trying here, but we've got this thing in our heads of what you did, which they were absolutely within their rights to do. But as time went on, and me and Mrs. Degsy spent more time together, and we all got to know each other better. Me and Mrs. Degsy got married in 1998, and as time passed by, the darkness of that period of time passed. I cannot genuinely remember the last time it was mentioned. You must be going back to I don't know, it's sometime in 1995. And like I said, I'm not going to go into details here, but me and Mrs. Degsy have hurt each other. We have both done things that were shit, and her parents have seen that. They have seen that I gave Mrs. Degsy the support and time that she gave to me. But yeah, fundamentally, we get on great. We are just like family now. It's as simple as that. And we were around there just a few days ago. Forgiveness and understanding are powerful things. They will get you far further in life than condemnation and hatred. And one other thing that Dunover asks here is what's going on with the fact that I still gamble? Because that's kind of what the channel is in some regards. I've got my online slots videos. There's the video of me out in the pub with my friends, as Dunover says here, shoveling £20 into a fruit machine or a cabinet machine. Is it all under the radar? Is it secret or anything like that? And the answer to that is no. We have a joint bank account. We've got 3 accounts. They're all with the same bank. One of them's the current account, one of them's the savings account, and one of them is the mortgage. They are all joint accounts, so we have equal access to both of them. So for example, when I make a £100 deposit into Unibet, that's on our joint bank account, Unibet, £100. Or when I go out, when I go out to the pub with my friends, I like to have a decent chunk of cash on me in case I'm going to get stuck into a machine. If it's a compensated machine, not that there's hardly any of the actual proper fruit machines left now, but you want to have at least 200 quid on you if you're going to properly take on one of those things now and be sure that you can force it out. And with the random machines, I'll have a figure in my head that I'm prepared to spend. So yeah, I'll probably take like £300 out at the cash point on the day of going out to the pub with my mates. I'll just take £300 out in cash. And none of that is secret. None of that is underhand. None of that is disguised. I am completely honest about the fact that I still play these games, but it is it's on a completely different level, a completely different planet to how it used to be. It's kind of like my entertainment spend, and it's completely transparent and above board. That video, for example, the final countdown video where I won the £2,000 odd, of course, Degsy Jr. was in the room with me on that one. You can hear her in the background when Mrs. Degsy was out at the pub with her friends. And there was no secrecy around that. Yes, I was playing with some real money at an online casino, and I happened to win pretty big. There is no subterfuge or secrecy or anything like that around it. It's like where I was compared to where I am are two such polar opposites, and I would never ever risk any of what I have now in my life in the way that I did in the past. And part of that is the fact that there's no secrecy around the fact that I still enjoy chucking 150 quid maybe into an online casino from time to time, or going out with my mates and having a punt on the machines in the pubs. I do get it, and I do get what Dunover's getting at here, which is, can you have this kind of, as someone who was completely addicted, utterly and full bore addicted, can you have this kind of, as he says there, this cutting down mentality? And he's absolutely right. For some people, that absolutely isn't a thing. There's someone I know who had an addiction as bad as mine, and when he quit, when he hit that low point and I've got to stop gambling, for him it was, I am never going to gamble ever again. And he has kept that up now for, I think he's at 20, not quite 20 years, about 18 or 19 years, and he has not gambled one single penny ever since. And we had this conversation, kind of like what Dunover's saying here. I don't understand how you can be like a less addicted ex-addict, and I absolutely understand that for some people, complete removal from it is the only way to do it. I don't know, for me, yeah, you know what, when you'll see in my online slots videos, I get a little bit pissed off when I lose. I'll get happy when I win. It's like a tamed, neutered version of what used to be in the past, but it has no capacity now to harm me or damage me, or more importantly, damage the people around me. I'm not saying it's the best way to do it, or that it's necessarily something that would work for everyone, but it's how I have maintained things now for many, many years without any kind of financial issue whatsoever. And the other thing to remember is that on the fruit machine side, I started winning on fruit machines back in 2001. That was when I got a little bit of a clue. So in essence, for the last 20 years, I have been winning on fruit machines. So that takes a lot of the sting out of it. I remember back in, you must be going back to like 2001, 2002, where I really lent into using the knowledge that I had, the machines that I had locally, the pubs that I had locally. It was not unusual for us to stack up like £1,000 in pound coins, in £20 pound coin bags on a fucking shelf in the house. And Mrs. Degsy would be like, are you going to pay that into the bank? Because there's over £1,000 there. We should probably pay it into the bank. And that was when I was filling the car up. Like I'd go to the petrol station and fill the car up and I'd pay with bags of pound coins. Or we'd go out for a meal together, sit down, the Chinese, and the bill would come to whatever it may be, 50, 60 quid. I'd pay it with pound coins. I couldn't get rid of the fucking things fast enough for that period of time. So it was a very, very stark contrast to what had gone before, which was when I was skint all the time and always trying to beg money. And there's also just a lovely little comment from Mac there, echoing one of the comments left on the video that, you know what, without this exact sequence of events, things may not have ended the same way as he says there. I suppose it could be argued without the fruit machine addiction, the timing of things might not have worked out. So have to say in a way, despite the times of despair, all's well that ends well, which is, yeah, you know, it's like I say, the whole butterfly effect thing. Who knows? like me stood outside the Shakespeare on that day back in April of 1994, having been dumped without the fruit machines. Don't know. It wasn't like the only thing I was being dumped for, but it was certainly a factor in the equation. So yeah, if I wouldn't have been dumped by my girlfriend at the time, I wouldn't have then the next month rung Mrs. Degsy up and asked her if she wanted to go for a drink together. So you can't unpick it. That's the thing. You cannot unpick the past. It's happened. It's set. It's concrete. We can learn from it. We can try to understand things. We can live for the present and hope for things in the future. But there's nothing to be gained from trying to refight battles that were completed 27 years ago, because you can't do that. So I hope this video has done its job in giving you all replies to your comments. And I will repeat one more time, I know I'm into the repetition phase here, but I cannot thank all of you enough for leaving the comments that you have on this Gambling Low Ebbs video and on the previous ones as well. I say I would not have got this series done without you, and I will press on and I'll get part 6 done. I'm not to say I'm not looking forward to that one would be understatement of the century as well, but I will. I know what it's going to look like. I know what I need to do for it. I will try and get it together and get it out there for you in a reasonably timely fashion, but I can't promise you exactly what that's going to look like. But I've got this far now, so I will finish it off, but I would not have got this far with it were it not for every single person here who can see. If I didn't read out your exact comment, I apologise. There were a few that were on similar lines, but I've read every single one. I've dropped you a like and I've left you that comment there. So just to let you know, it does genuinely mean a lot to me.
Nowadays, depression is, everybody talks about it more openly. Got to look after people. That person's struggling a bit. We better go and help them. That didn't happen then, did it?
Society used to be all about just coping and getting on with it, and you'll all be okay. There was so much bravado, and it never felt like it was the right thing to do, to put your hand up and just go, God, I'm struggling here.
From 1991 to 1994, when I think about that period, it feels like it was 10 years. It was really intense, just from the attention, Those are these personal things that I'm still trying to get a grip on. And we just wanted to make music.
The lead singer of the rock band Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, has been found dead at his home in the United States. Police say it looks as if he shot himself. He was 27 years old.
I remember running straight upstairs to tell my mum and dad that Kurt Cobain had died because it was on the news. I remember it was the first time I cried about losing something or someone. It felt like someone you knew.
I'm still processing Kurt's death, you know? Because I have to explain it to my kids who love Nirvana. Because for the longest time, you know, I would try to process and talk about it with friends and family and things like that. And they would help me. But now, like, I feel like I have to help my kids go through it. It's a lifetime of healing.
So I am just going to throw this little bit onto the end of the video here. I watched this evening When Nirvana Comes to Britain, which is a new programme available over on the BBC. If you've got your iPlayer, you can watch this programme. Nirvana, they're kind of like me and Mrs. Degsy's band. They were a big, big thing when we were starting to get together. I remember dancing with her at the Stomp at Manchester University before we were even going out together. And I do also remember my girlfriend of the time accusing me of fancying Mrs. Degsy, which in fairness was completely true. We would kind of mosh around to Nirvana at the Stomp, and it was, never mind In Utero and their earlier album Bleach. They were all albums that we used to listen to together. But that little clip that I put in there, that was the one that resonated with me when I was watching this just, well, God, about an hour and a half ago. It always gets a little bit messy with me, anything to do with Nirvana, because of the period of time that they represent, that, you know, essentially 1989, 1990 through to 1994, when Kurt killed himself. And that is, of course, when I'm seeing these dates come up on screen as I'm watching this documentary, which I do highly recommend. Do watch this. It's really, really good. And it was those lines about depression that really kind of resonated with me. Mrs. Degsy's dad also suffers with depression and anxiety, and he got a rough ride back in the 60s and 70s. And it really was that kind of, what the fuck is the matter with you? Just pull yourself together, will you? And this is why I remain optimistic, because things get better. Mrs. Degsy's dad had a terrible, terrible time with depression and anxiety at a time when society and people simply did not understand it or did not want to understand it. In Mrs. Degsy's lifetime, as she was going through her 20s, there was help available to us. But you can see here that it's well established that Kurt Cobain suffered from depression. And you can see the hurt on the face as well of the two remaining members of that band, how much they still hurt about that period of time in their lives. And I'm sure you'll have got that from the Gambling Low Ebbs series, that I felt that many, many times for a lot of the time. But the point is here that Nirvana were kind of like my band, and they were also then me and Mrs. Degsy's band. I remember walking around in Radcliffe. This was when things were getting really bad with my addiction, but I was selling things and I was scrabbling around for money. But I would keep my Walkman and I would keep my Nirvana cassettes, and I would walk around at stupid o'clock in the morning round estates that I probably shouldn't have been walking through after dark by myself, and I just had Nirvana pounding into my ears. And I remember me and Mrs. Degsy absolutely moshing next to each other, like into each other's faces at the Stomp. Oh, back end of 93, early 94, the Nirvana track Rape Me, just screaming rape me at each other. There's something about Nirvana. If you were there at the time, they will connect with you on a primal level. A one-of-a-kind band that we will never see the likes of again. Please do watch, if you haven't already, when Nirvana came to Britain on the iPlayer. And it just chimed with me when I saw that kind of thing at the end there, that comment at the end there, where depression for so long was just this hidden illness. It was like kind of just pull yourself up and get over it, you fucking loser. And they do talk about this, how the dynamic shifted just in those few years that Nirvana were active. Kurt, of course, was famously anti-homophobic. You know, he was like, if you're a homophobe, don't come to our gigs, don't buy our records. In an era when, you know, for some fucking gutter press rags in the UK and that kind of thing, being homophobic was still a way of life. So yes, I will just append this to the end of the Gambling Low Ebbs Part 5 Q&A. I realise it doesn't really change much in terms of the greater context of the video, but it does perhaps maybe just feed into that sense that for me and Mrs. Degsy, we saw someone who we deeply loved, and we also saw someone who was in pain, and we connected and we helped each other out, and 27 years later, we're still here. Watch when Nirvana came to Britain. They've got Dave and Chris, of course, who were the drummer and the bass guitar in the band, so you've got it straight from their mouth about how they felt at the time. I cannot watch anything to do with Nirvana without getting into a little bit of a teary mess. As much as I love their music, I still have to, my brain has to go into a certain sort of place to even be able to listen to their music. But, you know, if even today, like in the year 2021, what is your favourite band? It would be a toss-up. It would be Nirvana or it would be The Cure. I'm not entirely sure which. Don't make me choose between Nirvana and The Cure, but it would be one of those two for sure. So this will be a little bit added on to the end of the Gambling Low Ebbs Part 5 Q&A. Okay, so I realise this is going on a bit now, but you know what? One final little bit here. I said to Mrs. Degsy that I'd watched that documentary on the BBC. She was playing World of Warcraft with Degsy Jr. Whilst I was doing that, I said to her, I remember us moshing around, even before we were going out together, to Nirvana's tracks, to that In Utero album at the back end of 93 into 94. And I remember us screaming, rape me, into each of our faces. And she said, hang on a minute, let me just go upstairs and get something. And what she had done through every single property, every single house we have ever lived in since 1994, she has kept this t-shirt. I swear to you, I have not seen this t-shirt for 20 years or more. I thought it was lost. But what Mrs. Degsy was actually doing was keeping it safe, and she has carried it forward through every single house that we have been through, every single place that we have lived in. And she still has it, and she pulled it up, perfectly preserved from the back of a drawer in our bedroom, and said, yeah, you know what? I've still got that Nirvana t-shirt. I've still got that t-shirt that you wore when we used to dance at the Stomp together. And there it is. It will have to go back, I guess, it will have to go back into the drawer. It will have to go back into safe storage. Left to my own devices, I would just wear that every single fucking day. But I guess it will have to go back to a safe space where Mrs. Degsy can keep it. But honestly, that is what love looks like. It isn't always the most obvious, gorgeous, Hollywood-style representation, but it can manifest itself in all kinds of ways. And you know what? Here's a t-shirt that Mrs. Degsy has kept for 27 years because it reminds her of when we used to dance around at the Stomp in Manchester to Nirvana. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you have enjoyed this video, and I will catch up with you next time. But for now it is goodbye.